3 U-turns, 1 month. And just like that, the image of Keir Starmer as a bold and uncompromising reformer is starting to crack. Just weeks into his premiership, the man once seen as Labour's iron-willed strategist is now facing a full-blown credibility crisis. A welfare bill in freefall, furious MPs ready to revolt, and a prime minister scrambling to rewrite his own policies again. So what happened? How did Keir Starmer, the same man who promised to be a different kind of leader, decisive, principled, and relentless, become the face of backpedaling politics? The public expected tough reforms. Parliament expected discipline. Instead, they got sudden reversals, internal chaos, and a leader who's already being described as diminished. But here's the twist. Starmer didn't just cave under pressure, he changed course, under fire from his own party. And what happened behind closed doors this week may be the most explosive turn yet. Because this time, it's not just about policy, it's about power. And the question now isn't just whether Starmer will recover, it's whether he's already lost control. Before the U-turns, before the cracks started to show, Keir Starmer was seen as something rare in modern politics. A man with a plan and the discipline to stick to it. He didn't shout the loudest, and he rarely threw punches for headlines. But beneath the calm exterior was a strategist who had spent years reshaping the Labour Party from the inside out. By the time he entered Downing Street, he had transformed Labour from a divided, chaotic opposition into a government in waiting, and he did it without blinking. Supporters hailed him as focused, deliberate, and unshakably serious. He wasn't trying to charm his way through politics, he was trying to master it. Too many. Starmer was the adult in the room after years of what they saw as reckless leadership. He talked about tough choices, about fiscal discipline, about confronting Britain's biggest problems even if it meant upsetting people along the way. And it worked. For a while, even those who didn't vote Labour gave him credit. Here was a prime minister who wouldn't duck the hard stuff. Someone who would treat the job like a responsibility, not a performance. In the eyes of his allies, that image was everything. It told voters, you can trust me to lead through crisis. I won't flinch. But then the flinching started. Before the U-turns, before the cracks started to show, Keir Starmer was seen as something rare in modern politics. A man with a plan and the discipline to stick to it. He didn't shout the loudest, and he rarely threw punches for headlines. But beneath the calm exterior was a strategist who had spent years reshaping the Labour Party from the inside out. By the time he entered Downing Street, he had transformed Labour from a divided, chaotic opposition into a government in waiting, and he did it without blinking. Supporters hailed him as focused, deliberate, and unshakably serious. He wasn't trying to charm his way through politics, he was trying to master it. Too many. Starmer was the adult in the room after years of what they saw as reckless leadership. He talked about tough choices, about fiscal discipline, about confronting Britain's biggest problems even if it meant upsetting people along the way. And it worked. For a while, even those who didn't vote Labour gave him credit. Here was a prime minister who wouldn't duck the hard stuff. Someone who would treat the job like a responsibility, not a performance. In the eyes of his allies, that image was everything. It told voters, you can trust me to lead through crisis. I won't flinch. But then the flinching started. Before the U-turns, before the cracks started to show, Keir Starmer was seen as something rare in modern politics. A man with a plan and the discipline to stick to it. He didn't shout the loudest, and he rarely threw punches for headlines. But beneath the calm exterior was a strategist who had spent years reshaping the Labour Party from the inside out. By the time he entered Downing Street, he had transformed Labour from a divided, chaotic opposition into a government in waiting, and he did it without blinking. Supporters hailed him as focused, deliberate, and unshakably serious. He wasn't trying to charm his way through politics, he was trying to master it. Too many. Starmer was the adult in the room after years of what they saw as reckless leadership. He talked about tough choices, about fiscal discipline, about confronting Britain's biggest problems even if it meant upsetting people along the way. And it worked. For a while, even those who didn't vote Labour gave him credit. Here was a prime minister who wouldn't duck the hard stuff. Someone who would treat the job like a responsibility, not a performance. In the eyes of his allies, that image was everything. It told voters, you can trust me to lead through crisis. I won't flinch. But then the flinching started. By the time the welfare bill collapsed under internal pressure, it wasn't an isolated stumble, it was the latest in a string of retreats that had already shaken Starmer's image. The first major shift came just weeks earlier, when Chancellor Rachel Reeves quietly rolled back cuts to winter fuel payments. The original plan was framed as a necessary move to rebalance spending, But after a fierce political backlash, especially from pensioners and Northern MPs, the government reversed course. No dramatic announcement, no press conference. Just a quiet climb down that spoke volumes. Then, another pressure point burst into the spotlight. On the way to the G7 summit in Canada, Starmer made headlines not for foreign policy but for abandoning a key position. He had previously opposed a national inquiry into grooming gangs, insisting existing efforts were enough. But after mounting public anger and a recommendation from Louise Casey, Starmer suddenly backed a full inquiry. It was a sharp pivot one that many saw as reactive rather than principled. And then came the public self-reflections. In an interview with The Observer, Starmer admitted regret over hiring Sue Gray as his chief of staff, a move that had already drawn criticism for blurring the lines between civil service neutrality and political loyalty. He also acknowledged that his recent rhetoric on immigration, warning that the UK risked becoming an island of strangers, may have gone too far in isolation. Each decision could be justified. Priorities shift, public pressure matters. But together, they painted a picture of a leader struggling to hold the line. For a man who built his political brand on firmness and control, these reversals weren't just policy changes. They were dents in his armor, and the cracks weren't just visible to the public, they were widening inside his own party. Inside Parliament, the mood was shifting. And fast. The welfare U-turn hadn't just placated rebels, it had emboldened them. MPs, who had once whispered concerns behind closed doors, were now openly challenging the leadership. Starmer's inner circle, once seen as untouchable, was suddenly being forced to listen, for the first time since Labour took office. Backbenchers had leverage on, they knew it. At the center of this storm were two unexpected figures, Angela Rayner and Morgan McSweeney. Once cast as the iron gatekeepers of the Starmer operation, they were now in the unfamiliar role of negotiators, working overtime to cool tensions. Instead of driving policy forward, and the wish list from MPs, it's only getting longer. Top of the pile, scrapping the two-child benefit cap. It's a deeply unpopular policy among many Labour MPs, and Starmer himself has called it morally indefensible. But repealing it would cost an estimated £3.6 billion a year. That's even more than the welfare U-turn they just made. Then there's pressure to expand housing benefits, reverse certain NHS reforms, and address public sector pay. All expensive, all politically risky, behind the scenes. MPs are no longer asking if they can influence policy, they're asking when their turn will come. And this matters, because the more the leadership gives in to internal demands, the harder it becomes to say no next time. The message has been sent. Threaten rebellion, and you just might win. What started as a course correction now risks becoming a pattern, one where power doesn't just reside in Downing Street but on Labour's own backbenches. And if Starmer can't control his own party, how will he convince the country he can control the future? Every U-turn carries a price. But this time, it's more than just policy, it's perception. When Keir Starmer backed away from key reforms, he didn't just rewrite a bill. He rewrote the public's impression of his leadership. The man who once promised steady hands and firm decisions is now facing questions he can't afford to ignore. And the fallout isn't just hitting him. It's engulfing his chancellor too. Rachel Reeves built her reputation on fiscal responsibility. She was the one promising no unfunded commitments, the one reassuring markets that Labour wouldn't repeat the chaos of past governments. But now, she's the face of a £3 billion reversal, with the potential for billions more if additional demands are met. That's why whispers of tax increases this autumn aren't going away. Insiders admit that as the government's spending commitments grow, something has to give. And with Labour determined not to borrow more, the pressure to raise revenue is growing louder by the day. Already, Reeves is said to be weighing options, including potential hikes that would have been politically unthinkable just months ago. But there's an even bigger risk than the money: the loss of authority. Every time Starmer bends under pressure, he opens the door for more pressure. And his opponents inside and outside of Parliament have noticed. Tory strategists are already crafting the narrative. Starmer folds under heat. He can't stick to a plan. He caves to the loudest voice in the room. It's a dangerous image for a prime minister still trying to prove he's not just a competential Turtata commanding one. And Labour's own MPs, they're watching too. If one rebellion can force £3 billion in concessions, what else can be won? The dynamic has shifted and the leadership knows it. Because in politics, weakness doesn't need to be declared. It just needs to be noticed. Keir Starmer came into office promising transformation, not just for the country, but for the Labour Party itself. A new era, a new tone, and above all, a new kind of leadership. But now, with 3 major U-turns behind him, that promise is starting to blur. The cracks aren't just tactical, they're strategic. If the welfare retreat was the cost of survival, what happens when the next battle arrives? What about housing, immigration, the NHS? If internal pressure keeps winning, how long before Starmer's vision is no longer his own? Inside Westminster, even loyal MPs are quietly wondering, has the leadership peaked too early? The danger isn't just that Starmer appears indecisive, that Labour loses its central argument. The one it used to defeat the Conservatives was that it alone could balance compassion with control and reform with responsibility. Every retreat makes that argument harder to sell. And voters, they notice. More than politicians think. The same voters who gave Labour a historic mandate will expect results. Real change, real reform. Not a government chasing headlines or appeasing rebels. They didn't vote with hesitation. They voted for action. Meanwhile, the Tories are regrouping, weakened, yes but far from finished, and now they see an opening. A chance to paint Labour not as dangerous radicals, but as weak managers of the status quo. If Starmer can't maintain a steady course now, how will he weather the storms to come? Yet, this moment could also be a turning point, for better or worse. He could emerge as a leader who listens, adapts, and finds smarter solutions. Or as one who drifts, making policy by pressure, not principle. Because in politics, the question isn't just what have you done? It's what will you stand for when it matters most. 3 U-turns in a single month. Each one chipped away at the foundation. Starmer built his leadership on discipline, decisiveness, and control. And while each reversal may have solved a short-term crisis, they've sparked a much bigger question. Is this the beginning of a more flexible, responsive government? Or is it the start of a slow unraveling? Because behind the headlines and internal deals, one thing is becoming clear. Starmer is entering dangerous territory. Every concession now creates a blueprint for future rebellions. Every change of course invites more resistance. And every moment of hesitation gives his critics inside and outside the party more ammunition. Labour won the election promising to be different. But if Starmer keeps rewriting his own playbook, will the public start to wonder whether anything's really changed at all? And here's the twist no one's talking about. Insiders are already warning that the next political fight could come sooner than expected, and this time, it may not end with a compromise. Because if this is what month 1 looks like, what will month 12 bring?